Howdy, howdy. And I'm going to talk about a little bit about sensory testing as a therapeutic method. And note the question mark. The brain gauge is not a therapeutic device, and we do not claim it to be a therapeutic or a diagnostic device. And we have no claims on any of that. So anyway, but there's some really cool research that's been going on that you might be interested to know about. And there's a lot of cool interactions between tactile testing and pain. And rather than tell you the story, I'll just go on and tell you the story. On the next slide, let's describe an experiment. This was a really cool experiment. If you're a subject, you might not think so. I was actually one of the subjects many years ago. But there's a phenomenon called wind up, and you can create the feeling or the perceptive pain from heat without actually raising the heat on the skin. So if you deliver, like if you look at this black line, each time this black dot is here, there was a tap delivered. So there was a tap delivered to the skin with a big hot probe tip. It was about, but basically the skin temperature didn't change, but your percept does. This right here is the pain rating. 0 is the least, where you can't feel it. 10 to 15 is kind of mechanical. 100 is extremely painful, and people, that's just the highest pain rating. And you say, well, if you had to live with that, you would quit living. But anyway, I'm not suggesting anyone do that. But anyway, you get these taps, and each time you get a tap, as long as it's between 3 and 8 seconds apart, your pain rating goes up. So, and what we wanted to do was, what kind of interactions could you get between different stimuli and basically that painful stimulus. And what we found is, you see that all these stimuli have the same response. The pain rating goes up. And basically what we're doing here is we're vibrating the skin at the same time. But here we're vibrating it a little bit with a high frequency, and the pain sensitivity does not go up. So that's kind of interesting. So what's going on here? Well, this could possibly give us some clues. We did a whole bunch of studies a long time ago, back in the late 80s, 1990s, and early 2000s, to look at different types of responses that you get in the brain to different types of stimuli. So a low frequency flutter stimulus, these dark areas are activation. So you see this, so early, late. Now, when you give a high frequency, which is just like the thing that was suppressing the pain, you get 200 hertz. 200 hertz is just like 25 hertz. But if you deliver that stimulus long enough, you get this area that turns white. That white is actually inhibition. And then if you give a noxious stimulus or a painful stimulus, like the one from wind up, the one that I just showed you, where you tap the skin over and over and over again, you activate this place up here, completely separate from the place that you're activating here. Even though you're tapping the same place on the skin, you're activating a different place in the brain because it's a different type of stimulus. It's a noxious stimulus. It's not a mechanical one. So look at that. That's here. Look at that area of inhibition here that came from that vibration. And, basically what we find in the literature for many years, there's a lot of different people that tried to deliver passive stimulation to the skin to reduce pain. And about half the time it worked and half the time it didn't. But if you look closely at the literature, this type of stimulus did not suppress pain, and this type of stimulus did. So that might be one reason. Let's take another look. What's going on? This is the area that gets activated by painful stimuli. 3C is actually a subset of 3A. 3A goes from here to here. That's the classic area. 3B and 1, those are the areas that get mechanical input. And basically, so you have mechanical input coming from the thalamus, turning these areas on, and basically they suppress this area. So what do I mean by suppression? We have, when I say pain suppressing, you need to think in terms of lateral inhibition. But this anything with input from here has projections into this area, which is pain promoting. So noxious stimuli activate this area here, and mechanical stimuli activate the area here. So one thing is that you have interactions between these areas. I mean, that's what these pluses and minuses mean. And we did a whole bunch of modeling, a whole bunch of experiments and all this. This is like 30 years worth of work, but we're just cramming it into, short talk. And actually, there's several dissertations that went into this. But, so how, if somebody has chronic pain, that means, these areas are probably super hyperactive and it's really hard to turn that off. And I'll talk more about that, but it's a process of maladaptation. We'll talk about maladaptation on another talk. But one successful method in the 1950s and 60s for relieving chronic pain for people who just had debilitating chronic pain was to go in and surgically ablate these areas. They go in and they find the area that was responding to pain. They open up the skull and they stick probes in and then find out, and the person says, ouch. They find the area by probing, while the person is giving them feedback. And then they ablated that area. And then those people either no longer had pain or they were able to just get by on aspirin and they could get off opiates. So that was really cool. And that worked out really well until 1969. It came to a screeching halt. And the reason was seeing very quote unquote prominent neurosurgeons of the time tried to repeat the surgery. And this is after it had been done by a lot of people. And then they said, nope, this doesn't work. And it turned out that they were really doing really sloppy work. People went back and did postmortem histology on their patients and found out they actually ablated the wrong areas. But since they couldn't do it, they said nobody could do it. So it just sort of, that's what happens when you're just because you say you're good doesn't mean you are. That's a whole nother story. Now, what's the next step? So in 2008, this somebody, Mosley, he demonstrated that tactile discrimination tasks actually suppress pain, while passive stimulation did not. Now, the type of passive stimulation that they were doing was very different. It was very gentle. It wasn't a high frequency vibration or whatever. But what they were doing, they were actually delivering tactile stimulation that would activate these areas, and it didn't necessarily decrease the pain right away. But what happened was when you start doing tactile discrimination tasks, and these patients, they did them for something like a couple of weeks, and basically for 20-24 minutes per day. And then after 2 weeks, they had a much lower pain threshold. And that was maintained for about 3 months. So it took like 2 weeks. After 2 weeks of doing tactile discrimination tasks, things that made you ask questions, things that made you focus on this area. And when you focus on a particular area, that increases the activation. Now, there are tons and tons of research on how these areas, how area 3B1 becomes more active when you do things like just thinking about playing the piano instead of playing the piano. You actually activate all the things that you would be moving. And it's really interesting. But so think, basically the tactile discrimination task is really doing something that is suppressing this pain. Now, what could that be? Well, all these people, they didn't really get any better at the tasks they were doing, but they were recruiting mechanisms that were used for that task. And so maybe just by recruiting those mechanisms, they did something that, promoted the suppression of pain. That's really, and I found that extremely interesting. So I just thought you might be interested in hearing that as well. So anyway, if you have questions about anything else or you want to see a video on any topic, let me know. And thanks for watching and have a great day.